Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week, I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point, we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results. Welcome back to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. The goal of the show is to share game-changing stories that our guests are experiencing with themselves, their team, or what they're seeing in the industry. Now, the new currency we trade in is time. And with the shift to remote selling, people are on back-to-back Zoom calls, sometimes confusing being busy with being productive. And the need to be more purposeful, not only with ourselves, but our team and our clients, has never been greater than it is today. But how do we do that? Well, to help me understand this and unpack this question, I'm excited to have Morteza Zohrabi, a master black belt in Lean Six Sigma, join us on the podcast today. Morteza, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Karen, for having me.
My pleasure. Excited to have this conversation as I think it's a very timely one. So Morteza, why don't you start by just giving us a little background as what got you into Lean Six Sigma in the first place?
Sure. So I got my medical doctorate in Iran, and by the time I was trying to make the healthcare system the best system ever and in any service sector. But I learned that basically transforming the whole healthcare system is a huge project and almost impossible all at once. So during my journey, what I learned was there is a new way of thinking, which is basically taking one step at any given time. And those steps, they don't have to be radical changes. They could be small changes, incremental changes, and they need to be basically based on a methodology which is going to teach you something and as well as making improvement in the system. So making things better continuously, day by day, and action by action was what I learned. By the time they were calling that Kaizen, in North America we call that Lean. I fell in love, and for the last 20 years, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing Lean in healthcare, in almost every single area I've done it. And for the last while, I would say I've been focused on how to apply Lean into sales as well. And I'm learning that it's going to basically be a game changer in the whole sales process. And very happy to have that opportunity to chat with you today and your audience.
Thank you for that, Morteza. And what a daunting or task of trying to, reform or update the healthcare system, because I'm sure there's so many ways you could go with that. Now, for those of you or our audience who may not know what Lean Six Sigma is, because I have to be honest, years ago, I thought it was a form of martial arts. So there may be people out there thinking the same thing. So for those who may not be aware of it, but are in sales and are looking at ways to, as you mentioned, get incremental improvements daily, can you give them an overview of what Lean Six Sigma actually is?
So, lean is about creating better value for the customer and getting rid of any kind of waste in the system. So, that might be shocking to know that any kind of system, service sector, manufacturing, or any other system that is working, mostly what they're going through is creating waste as opposed to value. So, what is the definition of value? Basically, value is something that the customer is willing to pay for that. Anything else is called waste. And when you go through the process end to end, in most cases, you're going to learn that more than 90% of what we do actually could be eliminated or merged or transformed to a new way of doing business or basically changing the process with better outcome. So, lean is about adding value and increasing value, getting rid of the unnecessary activities, unnecessary products, and waitings in the system. And Six Sigma is basically another way to reduce variation and improve value for the customer. So they have a little bit of history. And I would say for a long time, these two schools of thought, they were kind of not, in peace with each other. So the lean folks were saying that it's all about value. The Six Sigma folks were saying that it's all about reducing variation. Nowadays, I would say for the last 15 to 16 years, basically these two have married and we're using them as needed. So generally speaking, we're going to add value anytime, anywhere, which is possible, and we're going to reduce variation as well. So Lean and Six Sigma, two ways of thinking, which today we could say a way of living, a way of life to basically provide more value to the customer and make things more predictable.
That's a great definition, and it's nice to see that they are married now, 15, 16 years later, because I think through this marriage, you're going to see the complementary benefits that both can
Absolutely.
provide. And the one word I heard there, that it was value. And when you think about sales, it's all about the value we can provide as salespeople. And I think especially now when there's so much noise and we have to really compete to get airtime, it's the value we can offer them. But what you said, the definition of the value is something the customer is willing to pay for. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So mostly in different organizations, based on our understanding of what is it that a typical customer demands, which means needs it, knows that they need that, so we call that want, and is ready to pay for that. So there is a demand. So we put together a package of services or product or a combination of both. Then we offer it to the customer. In some cases, we are lucky, so they take it. In many cases, we're not lucky enough, and we blame it on the customer that they don't understand what the value is in my product or in my services or a combination. In those cases, I would say that most probably the value that we are offering as service provider or product provider, basically sellers, are not matching with what the customer is asking for. So in many cases, we put together lots of widgets, lots of features, lots of basically features to the product, but the customer actually doesn't need those. What the customer needs could be heard mostly when they say no. So when you get a no answer, that's the time to understand what the customer really wants, right? So most of us take that no answer as an objection, and we basically naturally get unhappy, upset about that. But the reality is that if we continue the conversation and keep talking to the customer to understand why they don't want that, is it that our design was too much, or was it that we focused on an area which the customer didn't care about that, or is it too expensive? So the customer is asking for A and we are providing A. In addition to A, we have added 10 other features as well. So in these cases, I would say if we have open ears for voice of customer, especially in no answers, as well as when there is a complaint. When there is a complaint, or especially with the angry customers, those are the times that are the best for a salesperson to figure out why my product or why my services are not being sold as well as I would hope for. So I would say that is going to be the learning opportunity for not just the sales department or salespeople, also for the organizations, how to enhance their basically product design and product usability for the customers. So the customer perceives, yes, this is the right value with the right price at the right place. I'm going to take it.
Yeah, well, and all I can say is, in sales 101, that's the first thing is you can't take it personally, right?
Absolutely right.
And I think that's really great, Morteza. And what I've seen is, sometimes we perceive it's our perception of value, and that you've just kind of echoed that. And we need to ensure that it's actually valuable for our customers. And most companies these days are so inward focused in the design phase and in the validation phase. And it's like you need to go out and test this and just ensure that it is aligned with the voice of the customer. And especially I think now with what's changed in the remote working, and some businesses have pivoted, that their strategy pre-pandemic may be different now. So I would say that it's even more important to really check that validation. Is this still valuable? So that we're not investing and wasting time on the drawing board going out and it's not valuable at all. They're not willing to pay for it.
Absolutely. So what you refer to is basically one of the principles of lean. Don't batch. Don't batch products or features or modules in a product, which later you may find that this is not what the customer wants. So basically, don't wait for a couple of years before the design is perfectly matching your imaginations. You take it to market and you learn that nobody actually wants it, and that's a huge disappointment and I would say great deal of waste of resources. So as you mentioned, absolutely, as soon as there is an idea, before running with the idea and coming up with a very complex design with ton of investment, make sure that you interact with customers, even with a beta version. Start with something, get feedback from the customers, and from there make sure that you understand what is it that the customer really wants, and based on that move forward with the design.
I think that's great. And what that spells to me, Morteza, and what I see the shift in kind of the buyer behavior is when you're engaging with them to kind of get that feedback, those iterations, you're co-creating what that solution is. So you're allowing them to get some insight and some feedback into the design. And then it's almost hard to say no because you've had say in it. So there's a bit of, accountability, and they're asking for it and you're designing it. So I think that's where things are different. Whereas companies in the past would just go and make it and, as you said,
Absolutely.
launch it. And then, their needs might have changed, the industry changed, and it's no longer relevant. So I think it's that, that dance back and forth that you're checking in, confirming that we're still in alignment. And if you think about partnerships, I mean, how do you think the customer feels as you're checking in, and making sure like there's validation there? And that's what partnerships are. You're making it about them. And I would say they feel that. And at times like this, they need that.
So Karen, what you mentioned is basically another principle of lean, right? Don't push services and products to the market. Basically design your system. Even a sales system needs to be designed based on pull system. Listen what the market is asking, provide what the market is basically demanding, get feedback from basically the customer directly, and don't rely on surveys. Just you need to get out, you need to go to the marketplace, you need to talk to people that are really using the product, and then come back to the team, absolutely, with the survey as well, and basically improve your product. So just sitting in a design lab and pushing the design to the salespeople and asking them to push it to market is usually not going to work the best. In many cases, it's going to fail.
Yeah. And when you think about, what the customers are looking for now, and there was a report done a while ago, and one of the top three things was active listening. They want their sales reps to listen more. And you think about the pull system you just mentioned, and they're willing to give us the answers. But I think most salespeople are pushing their view and their thoughts and their product. And I think when you push too hard, like they're going to pull away. We talked about value. We talked about a little bit about the voice of the customer. And I liked when you said when you're listening and they're saying no, or when there's a complaint. And that's where I think when you look at, objection handling, my job is to understand it, not overcome it, and just, really understand like, why is that important? Like, if we want that spec, why? Because as what they're going to do is they're going to start opening up and telling you a little bit more about their business, their process, but they're also you're gaining business acumen, so that big picture. And I think the walls start coming down. And if you're leading with genuine curiosity as to what actually goes on behind your four walls, they're going to really start sharing. But I think when you think about that pull and listening, people aren't asking those questions. They're just like, no, okay, and move on. And it's like, well, why? You could dig deeper and get curious as to like really, what is contributing to that? Like, why is that important? Why in this particular timing of the business or side of the business? And I think customers then are get that sense that you actually really do care and you want to help us.
So, Karen, what you mentioned is another technique. It's called 5 why, right? So, instead of asking myself why I was not able to sell my product, the right question in lean culture and mentality is why the customer didn't like what I proposed. Is it because of the features? Is it because of the price? Is it because of the customer service? Is it because of I'm not certain about the features of the product? And instead of blaming that on anybody, in many of the sales, I would say force, they blame it on their own status of mind. I was not ready. I was not prepared. That might be part of the reason, but in most cases we need to forget about blaming it on someone. Let's figure out where in the process basically it fell down and it didn't go through. It could be because of the design, it could be because of over design, it could be because of the price, it could be because of the timing, anything, right? So if we go through the 5 why without finding somebody to blame at, we start with ourselves. Without doing that, we don't need to blame ourselves or the customer or whoever else. We just need to figure out what was the reason that the customer didn't like this product, or they liked it, they were not able to basically afford it, right? So they both end in with a non-sales I would say process, or let's call it a failure in the sales process. But again, as the smart Salesforce task, we need to always remember that after planning my sales call or sales meeting, I'm gonna go through the meeting. Within the meeting, I'm gonna communicate my planned sales pitch, which is basically what you ask for. These are the features to basically respond to those. This is what I'm offering you. And right after the meeting, check it. Did I deliver the right value or not? It failed because of. Do not blame anybody. Find the root cause of why the sales didn't go through. If there is anything that you can fix it, find a way to fix that. If there is no way to fix that, accept it. If there is nothing that you can do as a salesperson, that's fine. You can just accept it that, yeah, that's niche market is not my area, or this feature is not going to be added to my product for the next while, for some time. So accept those and proceed to the next, I would say, part of the market, which is willing and is looking forward to have the product and pay for that. So basically, checking after the meeting or reviewing what worked well, what didn't work well, is extremely important in the sales process as
Lots of great points there, Morteza. And for me, I love the 5 whys. In a lot of what you just mentioned is a lot of times, especially in that discovery phase, when you're trying to uncover challenges, and a lot of people are dealing with the symptoms of the problems. And when you're solving for the symptoms, they're temporary, they're surface, and they may not be happening frequent enough or high enough on the priority scale. So they're going to dismiss that. But when you peel back a little bit and look at the root cause, that's fueling the symptom. And I think people aren't doing enough preparation, or they don't have enough business acumen and understanding of their opportunities that allow them to have that visibility. But those 5 whys are where that comes in, and just, and sometimes we have to be mindful of how we ask why. Like, you could put in your opinion, why do you feel, versus just why it comes across as an interrogation. But you start getting what I see is when I don't do it, you get the customer thinking differently. And sometimes what it does is it pushes them from that, well, we've always done it this way, to then they're really stumped and they're like, I actually don't know why we did that or we're doing that. And I always think you need to gain that commitment to change. So when you can uncover that they don't understand in a nice way, you're not cornering them and showing them that there's a huge gap. But when you can show them that, there is a better way of doing it, all of a sudden they're coming at it from a different lens. And I love what you said after the meeting, because just understanding like that check in or review. And I think as a salesperson, self awareness and reflection is very important. And I don't know how many people do that and just take that 5 minutes after the call to kind of do a before and after and say, my objectives was this. And you kind of have that, if I don't achieve these three things, this was not a successful meeting. And then check back and see if you did that. But more importantly, if you didn't, why? And put those five whys on you, right? Why did I not do it? Was my agenda not aligned with their meeting, with their needs? Did I not cut out enough time? But I think when you can kind of hold space and get really raw with yourself, you start looking at things and maybe revealing things about yourself that you're not doing as a salesperson.
So basically, so far we have touched the methodology, right? Rational way of thinking. Even in the areas that we believe that's my art of, my personal art of sales, even in those areas, there is still things to learn, right? So with the even individual skill set, going through the PDCA, we always can learn something new and we can sharpen our axe, and be more successful in sales meetings as well.
So you mentioned PDCA. Can you break apart what PDCA is, Morteza, please?
For Absolutely. For any task, there is a planning phase. Again, understand what the customer is asking. How much am I complying with what the customer is asking for? And how am I going to bring that up and how am I going to present it to the customer? And how am I going to do that? Is it going to be over a Zoom call? Is it going to, I'm going to take my product and I'm going to let the customer work with that? And then basically, propose my product with the whole package or not. So that's the planning phase, which needs to happen ahead of the meeting. Doing, which is basically the sales pitch, and the meeting, or whatever way folks are using for the sales. Is it online? It doesn't matter. Even online presentation, even if you're putting that on a online store, still you're going through the same process. This is my plan. This is how I'm going to present my product. This is how I did it. And now it's time for checking. So for checking, basically we review what worked well, what didn't work well. And instead of blaming it again on, random causes, and saying, you know what, it was COVID. These days we have a good, basically excuse. It's because of COVID, right? The reality is that even within COVID, many are selling in the same industry. So let's figure out what was the root cause of not being able to sell, or what was the reason that we were able to sell more than what we expected. So basically, checking what worked well and what didn't work well in a factual way by looking at the data and by reviewing the data. And at the end, it's action based on our learning. If I learn that my way of business is working well, I'm gonna keep doing that, and I'm gonna make it a little bit better each time. And if I learn that this is not gonna work, basically my action is gonna be okay. Let me review the plan. Maybe the plan didn't adjust, or didn't work well, or let me review how I presented. So in the action, that's where the learning happens. That's where we learn that, you know what, the pitfall was in the planning or implementing, or maybe I didn't capture enough information to learn what didn't work well. So plan, do, check, and act.
And so, Morteza, at the end of the act, when you've learned, you've captured your learnings, your pluses and minuses, do you then circle back and go back to that planning phase so it's cyclical?
Absolutely, yes. So based on the learnings, next time that you're going through the basically planning, you're going to take into consideration all the learnings, and you're going to develop a better plan for the next round of sales. And then you're going to go through the do, check, and again action. So PDCA is a way of life. It's not a one-off, I would say, cycle. Going through that once and then we're done. We're a perfect lean salesperson. No, it has to become the way of life. That's how we think.
I love that. And I can see how it could apply to all aspects of our life. And I think just when we opened, we talked about, the currency we traded now is time. And I think if you're not purposeful and intentional and really in that planning phase, kind of anticipating like where do I want to go and what 3 to 5 questions do my customers going to have, and just really being mindful of their time and our time, I think this is a great tool to do that. And as you mentioned, the doing is almost irrespective of the environment. So if we are, if we modify to remote and then there's a bit of face to face in the coming months, it's still the doing part. We're still going to be doing something. I think some of the technology and the tools are going to be different in a remote environment. But what my takeaway from this is just getting that ingrained so it's cyclical. And really what it spells to me is continuous development and that growth mindset of just like it's always iterating. We're always getting better, but we're always learning.
That's basically the philosophy of lean. Um, don't wait too much. As far as you have a good enough product to present to market, go to market, present it to your audience, seek feedback, factual, honest feedback, and be ready for that. And basically improve your product or service, and again, go back to market. So don't wait for years to develop a perfect product. As soon as you have something good enough to present, go through the process.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I love that you say factual because I think when we're personally invested, we get emotions and emotions run high and, that desire to win. And sometimes we're not seeing, we have confirmation bias and we're seeing or we're hearing what we actually want to hear. But when you look at the data or you go through something like PDCA, it's going to reveal something very different. So I love that you said, like, remove, detach from that outcome and remove the emotion. So you're truly working on improving the right things. So this seems like it could take us to a little bit, we're talking about iterations and process. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and just look at, sales process. And when you think about now, again, from all stages of the sales process, we've shifted to remote selling. So a lot of even at that top of funnel stage, prospecting, we're not going to these trade shows anymore. So I think I would like to, unpack a little bit about, first of all, the importance of a sales process, just as it relates to Lean Six Sigma and the productivity element of it.
Absolutely. So first, let's go through the definition of process. A process is basically a combination of elements which they transform input to output. So far, three elements: input, output, activities, and there is a fourth element which is called feedback. So in sales process, I would say the input are, let's say, at a strategic level. If you're selling at a strategic level and it's a corporation, so the inputs are basically who my audience is, and why are they basically in this business, and what is in it for them to go through this sales process or not, right? So each person may have different intention. Some of them might be doing this because they're trying to solve a problem. Some of them might be dealing with us because we're giving them something to take them to the next level. So there are different mentalities and different states of mind. Some people are growing, some people are just trying to hold whatever they have, and some are overconfident. These are extremely hard to overcome because they're overconfident in what they have, and they believe that don't offer anything. I'm quite happy with what I have. The interesting thing is even these I would say these faults, very soon you're going to see that they turn to unstable. These that are extremely confident with a I would say with a new problem, they're going to turn to a person that is seeking solution. So it's extremely important to know your audience. So one of the input in this process is going to be know your customer, know how they define quality, how they define value, and how much are they ready to pay for. If you have, let's say, $1 million product for a company that is not ready for that level of investment, most probably you need to come up with different versions of your product and make sure that you're offering the customer the right product which is affordable to them as well. So these are the input prior to the sales process. So if you don't know your audience, if you don't know who you're dealing with and why is it that they're in the process, and what is their role, are they the technical people to basically review the features of the product, or are they the decision makers, or are they holding the money? Based on the roles that they have, it's extremely important that you design your process. So in the sales process, basically, you have, again, there are different, based on what product or services we're talking about, there are different processes. But generally speaking, you put together a value proposition. It could be a proposal, it could be a sales pitch, whatever. So you present it to the key stakeholders. Usually, if it's a, I would say, a strategic sales, they're going to engage others. In the larger organizations, they're going to bring in more people. And the more people you bring in, the more confusion there are going to be. Some of them might like your product, some of them might not like your product. So it's extremely important before hitting to that room full of different stakeholders, and you not knowing, not being sure that how am I gonna basically present the value proposition. You need to know who are the basically players in the whole process. Then, based on what they need and what you have put together, you need to start the conversation. Some conversations are direct and very explicit. This is the product, and that's the basically the functionality. Be ready to answer the questions. And again, and some organization and some procurement models which are based on innovative way of procurement, they are iterative, so they take you for these kind of conversations for 3 to 5 times, and they want to talk to you and make sure that what you're offering is flexible enough and is responsive enough to what they need. So all you need to remember is that in the whole process, I know who is the key stakeholder here, what is it that they're looking for, what are their concerns, and how do they define value. The more you have intel from basically your stakeholders, the better sales design you could have. You present it, and then basically, as you mentioned, there's always going to be some objections. The less of these kind of objections you have, the better. But again, if you presented something with no objection, that's going to bring up some concerns. If I'm in a meeting that there is no objection, usually it's a signal that something is not working well. But if you're lucky enough and there was no objection and the sales was closed, good for you. If not, again, go through the check. What didn't work well, what worked well, how can I get back and basically repair my relationship with them and manage my relationship with them, and how can I add value, basically, to the customer, and how can I keep the conversation going. If you learned something good about your process, bring it into action. If you learned that you missed some steps in between, still, don't fail to learn from that failure. It's extremely important to basically take the lessons learned to the process for the next round and hopefully get a better result.
That's fantastic. So many areas I just want to pull apart there and go deeper. But one of them that you just said is the lessons learned, and I think those who don't have a sales process, or they're not in tuned with it, they're unaware of the lessons learned, so they don't know if they close the deal, they can't pinpoint why. Like, what was it just that real in that initial stage, was it clarity of my target audience, was it I understood that role or that persona and the language I use. And I just find that that's so important, because a sales process should be repeatable. But if I don't have insight or visibility as to what's contributing to that, both in the positive and the negative, I can't bring it back into it or remove it or look at why I'm not getting the results. And I think that's, for me, the biggest where people are failing, is that choke. And they're like, yeah, we're winning and our sales are up. But if you ask them why, they can't give you an answer.
So, in a lean sales process, you need to see the improvement as you move on. So, experience doesn't mean that you do the same thing for 30 years. Experience means you do something today, you learn something from that, hopefully it works. Even if it doesn't work, next time that you're going to do that, you have more insight. And you go through that basically, and you learn from that, and the next time you make it even better. So if we're doing something for a couple of years, with same results, random results. We're not sure is it going to work or not, and our confidence to our process is basically as it was 2 years ago. Most probably, it's not experience. It's just doing the same thing over again and again.
And Morteza, in your opinion, how much would you say contributes to the actual process itself, the design of the process versus the execution from the salesperson?
I would say it's a combination. Personally, I believe that more than 80% of any issue in any process is related to the process design. So let me rephrase it. So any problem, if you find out what are the root causes, over 80% of the root causes are because of the way that the process is working, the way that the design of the process has been done. Which means the way that I'm presenting, the kind of conversations that I have, my understanding from the stakeholders, my understanding from basically their stake in the process, and everything about the sales. I would say probably less than 20% is based on personal level of, I would say, personal skill set. So if I'm the person that is able to close deals one after the other, most probably I'm doing something that my colleague is not, and there could be a learning between us. We just need to create that environment that it's not competition between ourselves. It's us basically for the market. Um, so there's always things that we can learn, and I've heard that quite often that sales is something that you are born with and you can't gain it. Personally, I don't believe that. I believe that yes, there are some traits that some people have more and some people may not have as much as others. But if we design a process which is going to be a learning process, a process which is evolving to the next level, for sure, with any level of skill set, it's going to be improving. So some people may start from down here. Those that have higher of those kind of traits may start somewhere up here. But both of them are improving and are getting better and better.
Yeah, that's great. I would agree. I think some people have a bit of a natural ability, but I definitely think that the skill set is teachable. I didn't think it was that high. 80% is due to the process. That's huge. And what that says is for those companies that don't have a sales process, like think about the opportunity that they're missing, and also seeing that it plays such a high percentage. Think about those who have redundant steps in there. We talked about waste. So they're asking their reps to go through these processes, get information, do these activities with their clients that are no longer relevant. So you're wasting their time. And you think about the reps investing and maybe thinking, like, why are you asking me to do this? It doesn't even make sense. So I think those 2 points just stress the importance of defining and having a sales process. But beyond that, make sure it's reflective with your current environment, the way your buyers are buying, so that you're going to increase that adoption. Your salespeople are actually going to follow it because it makes sense. So, based on that, Morteza, what best practices or guidelines would you have for sales leaders out there that are looking to maybe modify it? Would they bring in their team, and how often would they do this? And could you walk us through a little bit of a process as to how that would unfold for them?
So within Lean, there is a way of solving problems. So there are different methodologies. So one of them is called DMake. It's Six Sigma basically methodology. It doesn't matter, but generally speaking, we get together for few hours. We're not gonna spend 6 months or a year to find what the root cause is. Um, in Lean and Six Sigma world, we believe in basically quick interventions. So quick design, quick intervention, and going back to market. So instead of spending 6 months to figure out what the root cause is, let's get together for a day or two. Let's review what the root cause is, and let's go through the whole process. Let's define what the problem is. Let's look at the numbers, basically measure. Let's understand what the numbers are telling us. I would say, it's extremely, I would say, it's very popular out there that we look at the data. They're telling us where the problem is, but most of us don't understand the language. So basically, numbers language is a language, is an identical language that we need to learn. So there are people that their job is to basically interpret the numbers, right? So in analyze phase, we need to understand what those numbers are telling. If Karen is quite successful in sales and Morteza is okay and John is, let's say, you on the lower end of the sales process. So there's something that Karen is doing and Morteza is doing in another way and John is doing in another way. So what is it that we can learn from each other? And so that is being retrieved at the analyze phase. And then finding the solution, from my perspective, is the most exciting but the easiest part of the process. So we come up with solutions, how we can learn from each other, how we can basically come up with a better way of doing things, and then let's have a plan, action plan. Let's try it and let's see if it's working or not. So at this point, which it may take between 3 to 5 days, usually for a larger process, but I've seen that many companies do it in a day or two workshop as well. So they go through the whole process, they bring in all the stakeholders within the company. Even if they can, they invite I would say, a trusted advisor or a trusted customer to join them and think in a different way and provide them some input from external side of the company as well. They go through the whole process, they come up with action plan, they don't wait for 6 months to implement that. They go back to market, implement it, capture data, and come back to the basically the task force, present the data, and they learn that yes, it worked, or you know what, sorry, what we thought is going to work didn't work. Now let's figure out why, right? So after a couple of times of back and forth to the market and reviewing the factual data, we're going to learn, you know what, that was the root cause. And in many cases, I would say in less than 6 months, we may go through the process a couple of times. We can learn what is working out there, what's not working out there, and they come up with the solution which is going to work much better than what we started with. We call that Kaizen Blitz. So instead of having meetings one after the other, a couple of weeks interval between them, and taking 6 months, go to the room, shut the door, and make sure that all the stakeholders are there. You have enough coffee, enough cookies, and you spend from morning to afternoon. You come up with the action plan, and everybody runs after their pieces of work, and then they come back and basically they share their findings.
I love that. I think when you think about time now and people, you get this concentrated, focused effort for a shorter period of time. It's phenomenal. And the speed, like it's just, you're not wasting time. It's almost through these iterations, you're getting clarity and clarity and clarity. It's like going around a racetrack. But
Absolutely.
I think that clarity and that real understanding of the process just you start embodying it, like it's becoming ingrained in you because you become so immersed in it through these iterations and learnings, that I think when you're sharing it with your customers, it's very you're putting them at ease because you know it so well. And I think when you think about, reluctance to partner with you and there's risk, and but when you're sharing it because you know it so intimately, I think that can put them just at a really comfortable phase. I love in that Kaizen Blitz. First of all, I would say this could work for so many things, right? If you just want to look at a problem instead of drawing it out, doing meeting after meeting. And when you think of those meetings, like I always say, are you exchanging value for time? I would say most of them are not. So if you can just get everybody, the right people in a room, and hack it out, get the answers. If it's not what you're looking for, get back to the drawing board. But I love when you bring in a customer, because that, for me, that's critical, that voice of the customer, because it's almost like that's your sounding board saying, is everything we're doing meeting our target audience here? Like, because if it's not, we're spinning around, we're spinning our wheels for nothing, right? We're still inwardly focused. So I think getting that voice of them to say, yeah, guys, you're on the right track, a little bit more here, a little bit more there, they're our compass that we need to be looking at or looking towards.
So what I've seen in some of the meetings, the I would say the task force tries to convince the customer. That's a wrong thing to do. It's the other way, right? So we are not trying to convince one out of a million customer that we have. We are just bringing in the customer to basically think in a different way, think from a customer perspective. No, we're not bringing in a customer just to make them happy that yeah, you were part of our design. Doesn't matter. A patient, it could be a patient, it could be one of the buying companies, it could be anybody. If you're bringing in somebody external, do not try to convince them. Actively listen to the comments, and in most cases I would say they're too polite to be frank and candid. So if they said something, ask them more, and by providing them that feedback that you're open to listen, learn more and more, and basically embed that within your action plan.
Yeah, but I think we will never convince customers, and if that's what we're trying to do, it's going to erode the relationship. But I think, as you mentioned, our job is to get them to think differently, right? Create awareness to something, teach them something about themselves, their industry, their job through insights. That's what's going to get them. But if your goal is to convince them, I think you need to get back to the drawing board. Now, Morteza, that Kaizen Blitz, just with the way you described it, can you share or think of how, as salespeople, we want to win, but in order to win, we need to, develop and hone our skills. So, how can we adopt that Kaizen mentality or methodology and just start improving incrementally, like 1% every day, just to so we might not even notice it, but over time, we're seeing growth and change, but it's sustainable because we've done it in small bites.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say that again, that's the model Kaizen Blitz. Let's get together and let's do it. But in many cases, I've seen that it's not done properly, which means sitting together in a room and yelling and shouting, and one person dominating the room is not a Kaizen Blitz. It's just a meeting that somebody is taking it over, right? So in Kaizen Blitz, usually we need to have a facilitator, that the facilitator's job is to stay focused on the problem, make sure that we're not breaching the scope of basically the meeting, and as well as everybody is being heard, everybody is being basically participating at the meeting. So if everybody is sitting, and I've attended many meetings like that everybody's sitting there, we call that Kaizen, but it's just two or three of them that are talking and giving directions to others. You don't need a Kaizen Blitz for doing that. If there is a problem that we don't know the solution, if there is a segment of the market, or if we're getting failures in an area and we need a solution that we haven't thought of, then we need to have a real Kaizen Blitz. So a real Kaizen Blitz has some elements. So one of them is a facilitator, which is basically not taking sides in the conversation, right? So your job as a facilitator is just to keep us on track and make sure that all the ideas are heard. Number two, the participants need to know that this is not a blame game. This is a way to figure out how to basically find ways to improve the whole process. And prior to the Kaizen Blitz, the facilitator and somebody from the team need to spend enough time to capture appropriate and factual data. They need to review the data, they need to do the analysis earlier, and they need to take whatever is available to the meeting. So, again, no side and very factual, present the findings. And in most cases, we ask the facilitators to anonymize the data. So if it's, let's say, five of the sales people that are doing a better job, we don't ask them, okay, name them. It's Karen and it's Joe and it's Jack. No, we don't want that. We just want to find out that what is the behavioral or what is the process or what are the actions that these successful salespeople are doing and others are not doing. So anonymize and try to, stay away from blaming. The very first comment that we make in regard to, yeah, good job, Karen, it means that bad job, everybody else. We don't want that. So it's extremely important to have participants that their role is to share ideas, to create new knowledge, and basically to improve the sales process or any other area. Now we're talking about sales. And for the facilitator, the most important part is not to take any side. As much as basically the high end sellers are important, the data in those regards are important, those that are on the lower end of the sales process are important as well. So forget about who has done what, focus on what has been done, what did work well in that specific market, what didn't work in the same market. So then we can come up with a pattern, and then we can put together an action plan, a factual action plan. Again, I've seen in many Kaizen Blitz that they come up with, yeah, more collaboration, more communication, more, I don't know, briefing, more, closer attention to market demand. That's not what we're looking for. At the end of the workshop, what we're looking for are very specific actionable items that each of the participants know, okay, this is what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to measure the success. And that's the kind of data that I'm going to bring back to the meeting. Again, if we don't see ourselves as a team and we just see ourselves as a group with the same group, and team are different. Team, they interact together, they learn from each other. Even if they, have some, I would say, heated argument, it's for the sake of the result. It's not for basically, dominating the meeting. Group could be different. Group could be, yeah, we all are here from sales department, but we are competing with each other. That's not a team. That's not what I'm looking for in a Kaizen Blitz.
Wow, a lot of fundamentals there. I think those would be so powerful. I wish more companies knew about them to do them. But what I heard there is really the importance of the role of a facilitator, and just for that person to create a respectful environment, and to really, I think, as you mentioned, remain neutral, and, just be very data, like look at the facts, and not look at the names. But I think also the patterns, because for me, like I look at the sales process, and look at the sales process if
Absolutely.
you're doing something like that, and you look for the patterns, like at what stage or what persona is this really taking off, so that you can double down on that. But I also think when you're doing this on a one-on-one, maybe in a sales coaching
Absolutely.
environment, you're also getting behavioral patterns, so you're understanding more about your people. That's what's driving this. And again, you can do the Kaizen, or the incremental growth, on the person themselves. But I think when you don't slow down enough to actually connect with your team and see what's contributing to this pattern or these successes, or on the other hand, like, why are you not hitting those numbers? It allows you to look for patterns, and not to go on another tangent, but now, people are working in remote, a lot of isolation. There could be an underlying um, issue there that needs addressing. So even though we're talking about process and sales, sales and data, in the same lens, we're talking about people. And I think when you can take that diagnostic lens and really start looking, you're going to find things that you have to then uncover, that you have to start working with, right? Like once you uncover something, you can't not do something about it.
It's always easy, to blame Jack and Joe and Karen. But it's extremely hard to blame the process. The reason is because, again, for the last 400-500 years, we've learned that it's people. If you organize people in the right way, you're going to get the bestest outcome ever. That's not true. We need the right people, and more important than that, we need right processes. Right processes, they don't exist. We need to create them. So we need to create those kind of processes step by step. Again, it's not that let's shut down the company and let's fix our processes and come back to business. No, those improvements are incremental. A year before, we had no idea that for the next 12 months we're going to be dealing with, a totally new environment. And a company that shut down to review their processes and come back to business, most probably they're not back to business at all. So that has to become part of our day-to-day activity. That has to become part of our day-to-day life. Do your job 5% of your time, 10% of your time. I done a couple of hours at the end of the week, Friday afternoons. We're going to have a lunch and learn. We're going to get together, and openly we're going to share our lessons learned. Secrets, which from my perspective means failure and success secrets. We tend to share, if you're extremely successful, we tend to share a couple of crazy stories about when we started, and that's it, and the rest is me. The reality is that no, that's not true. Secrets are about success and they're about failure. If we share these kind of secrets, let's say at the end of the week together, then the whole team will go up, right? Their performance is gonna go up. But if it's me hiding from you, and I take it that my personality is more outgoing, so I can, which is not. and I'm trying to sell more, and when they're comparing me to anybody else in the team, I'm going to be the top seller. That's not a lean culture. Together we can achieve more. Individually and hiding failures and basically not looking at the factual data, there is no way for basically maintaining in the market.
I love that. For me, I think culture is so important, and just what you mentioned, the lean culture, and together we can achieve more. And I think you nailed it with just that inclusivity and being honest and sharing. Like, we've all made mistakes, but I think the growth and the learnings are in the mistakes. I mean, if you're going to keep repeating them, there's no real learning. But I I have no shame in the mistakes I've made, because sometimes it's allowed me to enter into a completely new area that I wouldn't have otherwise found had I not made that mistake.
And again, Karen, we need to remember that lean doesn't start at staff level. It has to start from the top. So if we don't start at the top, and let's say everybody down here is in a lean culture, and the supervisor, director, CEO, whoever is thinking in a classic way, and is the way that they're ranking their staff, or even giving praise to a couple of the salespeople over others, um, basically that's going to ruin the whole culture. So it's extremely important to remember that lean culture doesn't start from bottom; it has to start from top. And absolutely, we need training, we need culture transition from different levels out as well. We need champions in different levels. But again, it's extremely important that the big boss knows that it's about the customer, it's about how to fulfill what they're asking, and it's about how to meet their demand, basically based on what we have to offer. And everybody else is here to assist them. If I'm the CEO, I'm here to support others. If I'm the director, I'm not here to basically be the boss and boss everybody around. It's about how to basically create that culture of, as you mentioned, inclusiveness, and being basically being focused on what the customer is asking. It's extremely important. Otherwise, if you have a lean culture in a classic company, very soon you're gonna be rated as one of the low performers, and most probably you're gonna regret. So it's very important to have the whole company have the transition.
I mean, I think that's typical culture, right? It's top down, and I think if you're modeling the behavior. So if your leadership team is very customer focused, they're adopting lean mentality, lean principles. Your team and your direct reports are all going to assume the same behaviors and roles, which are going to contribute to the customers and being very customer focused. So I think that's very in line with leadership and the importance of culture. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this, Morteza, and I know a lot of people are probably thinking, wow, from thinking maybe this was karate to now I see how much it can improve efficiencies, processes, learn more about the voice of the customer. We went through, PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, a lot of methodologies. If people are saying, you know what, I want to implement a few of these tools that you've mentioned, where would you suggest they start? Like, kind of, if you could give them three things that could say, you know what, this is a good place to start, just to get that incremental growth happening.
So I would say that PDCA, or Plan, Do, Check, Act, from my perspective, is number one. Plan your sales pitch or sales proposal, or whatever the process is. Plan it, whatever the presentation package is presented, check it for sure, and based on how complex it is, if it's even a one-off sales, still you need to think about that. What worked well, what didn't work well. If something worked well, I need to take it to action. Next time I'm going to do it again. If something didn't work well, I'm going to learn from that and take it basically to my next sales. So PDCA is number one. And number two is don't be too hard on yourselves. We need to learn to basically to enjoy the journey. And the journey, I mean incremental changes. Don't wait for a radical change to come. Don't wait for a technology to basically enable you to increase your sales by 50%. Don't wait that long. Yeah, if the time came and the technology was there, absolutely adopt it. But before then, adopt the incremental changes, or Kaizen, which means continuous improvement mentality. what is it that I can do today better than yesterday, which most probably is going to give me better results. So incremental changes and small and bits by bits improvement. And the third one is enjoy the journey and share that with your peers. So if you're learning something, share that with your peers and make sure that basically everybody else benefits from that. Soon you're going to get that back from the team members. So I would say this could be the starting point. And if somebody was more interested to learn more, as you mentioned, the belt structure in Lean and Six Sigma, that's not martial art. That's basically how you start the journey. So my suggestion is at least take a white belt training for Lean Six Sigma to learn what is it that Morteza and Karim were talking about for an hour. So basically, simple principles, but you can go up to master black belt, which may take you 10 years to get that level. But generally speaking, a salesperson needs white belt, maximum yellow belt, to be able to apply those concepts into their day-to-day activities. So these are my 2 cents uh, for the audience.
Thank you. So those are more than 2 cents from a master black belt. I think that's, there's a few more zeros after that, Morteza. So I wanna thank you so much for your time and really sharing your insights and your tactical approach that will help people get started on their journey to lean. And Morteza, if anyone's looking to learn a little bit more or perhaps follow you, where would you suggest they go about doing that?
The best place to interact is LinkedIn. I would love to be in touch with colleagues on LinkedIn, and please feel free to add me to your connections. And I'm quite open to have conversations about sales and how we can apply that in different processes. So I can share with you my LinkedIn address, and if that's possible, you can probably share it.
Okay, so those will be included in the show notes for everybody, Morteza. So again, thank you so much for your insights and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with our audience. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.